A billionaire found a baby inside his car boot.
The words hit Adrian like a knife. Please, don't throw me away. For a moment, nobody moved. Rain poured heavily around them while the little girl curled herself tighter inside the boot like a frightened animal. Adrian stared at her silently. She looked terribly skinny. Her cheeks were sunken, her lips were dry, even her hands trembled from hunger and cold. One of the guards stepped closer angrily. "Who sent you here?" he barked. The little girl flinched hard and covered her head immediately. I'm sorry, she cried weakly. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Something about the fear in her voice felt too real. Not the voice of a thief, not the voice of someone pretending. The driver looked shocked. Sir, I checked this car before leaving the company. Nobody was inside. Then how did she enter? Another guard asked nervously. Nobody had an answer. Adrian kept staring at the girl. Then, suddenly, he noticed blood, fresh blood, a small stain near the edge of the boot. His face darkened immediately. Bring her out, he ordered. The guards carefully helped the girl out of the car. The moment her feet touched the ground, her weak body almost collapsed. Adrian quickly held her arm before she could fall. The little girl looked up at him in fear, and Adrian froze. Those eyes. For one painful second, they reminded him of his dead wife. His chest tightened unexpectedly. Sir, the driver called carefully. Adrian released her slowly and looked away. Take her inside. The guards looked surprised. Nobody entered Adrian Cole's mansion freely. Nobody. But nobody dared question him. The little girl was rushed inside while servants quickly brought towels and warm water. The mansion that had been cold and silent for years suddenly became filled with movement again. Adrian stood near the fireplace while the girl sat on the couch, shivering under a blanket. A maid brought food quickly. The moment the girl saw the food, her eyes widened in disbelief. Then suddenly, she grabbed the bread desperately and began eating fast like someone who had not eaten in days. The servants exchanged emotional glances. One maid quietly wiped her tears. Adrian watched silently. The girl ate too fast and suddenly started choking. The maids panicked, but before anybody moved, Adrian himself handed her water. Everyone became shocked. Adrian never cared about anyone. The little girl collected the glass carefully with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian sat across from her. What's your name? The girl became quiet immediately. Fear returned to her face. She lowered her head. I don't know. The room fell silent. Adrian frowned. You don't know your name? She shook her head slowly. One of the maids gasped softly. Adrian's voice became lower. Where are your parents? The little girl looked down at her tiny fingers. I don't know them. The room became quiet again. Nobody knew what to say. She looked so lost, so alone, like someone the world had forgotten completely. That night, Adrian could not sleep. For the first time in years, the silence inside his mansion felt different. His mind kept returning to the little girl sleeping in one of the guest rooms upstairs. The next morning, he saw her sitting quietly near the garden, feeding breadcrumbs to birds. For the first time in a long while, Adrian smiled faintly. Days slowly turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, and somehow the little girl became the light inside the dark mansion. Her laughter slowly filled the empty halls. The servants became happier. Even Adrian himself began changing. He no longer locked himself inside his office all day. Sometimes he ate breakfast with her. Sometimes he watched her play in the garden silently from afar. The cold Billionaire people feared slowly began feeling human again. One evening during dinner, Adrian looked at her carefully. You need a name, he said calmly. The little girl blinked. A name? Adrian nodded slowly. Then after a few seconds, he said softly, Aurora. The girl repeated it slowly. Aurora. A small smile appeared on her face. I like it. From that day onward, everybody in the mansion called her Aurora, and for the first time in her life, she finally felt like she belonged somewhere. But sometimes, strange things happened, very strange things. Aurora would suddenly wake up from sleep crying. Sometimes she would stare at mirrors too long. Sometimes she would whisper words nobody understood. That night, heavy rain fell once more outside the mansion. Aurora sat near the fireplace reading quietly while Adrian watched her silently. Then finally, he asked the question that had been haunting him for months. Who exactly are you? Aurora slowly lifted her eyes toward him. The fire danced softly across her face. Her lips parted slowly. I am. Suddenly, Aurora grabbed her head painfully. The book fell from her hands. Aurora, Adrian called immediately. Her breathing became heavy. Then blood slowly ran from her nose. The servant screamed in shock. Aurora's eyes rolled backward and her body collapsed hard onto the floor. Aurora! Adrian rushed towards her immediately and carried her into his arms. Her body felt cold, too cold. Aurora, open your eyes! But she did not move. For the first time in years, fear entered Adrian Cole's eyes. Prepare the car now, he shouted. Rain poured heavily as Adrian carried her outside himself. The guards and servants watched in shock. The billionaire who feared nobody looked completely terrified. Inside the speeding car, Adrian held Aurora tightly while the driver raced to the hospital.